So in the last episode, I decided I was gonna make a custom frame bag for my bike. So I went through my process of like taking measurements and then doing my digital workflow. But not everybody has those digital tools. So in this episode, I'm going to go over how I would manually get those measurements, and then I'm gonna show you the bag build. And the only tools that I need to get that frame shape patterned is cardboard, a measuring tape, a writing utensil, and some tape. So when I talked to Nick from Rogue Panda on my live stream last week, he had brought up bolt-on bags. And that's something I'd never considered before, but my bike has 2 sets of bolts within the frame. So on this project, I'm going to switch it over to the bolt-on because I think it looks sexier. The first thing that I'm gonna do is tape the cardboard to the bike. So this is a pretty good starting point, and I'm just gonna put a point at each corner. And I have these cables that I have to keep in mind, which I think in my digital workflow, I didn't think too much about. And then I'm gonna go to the bolt holes in case I do a bolt-on bag, and I'm gonna mark where those are. In this top side, because I have those cables, I'm gonna trace a bit along the cable so I have a general understanding of where those are located. So here I have the final shape, generally, of the frame bag, and now I'm just gonna manually round some corners and smooth out my lines. And here I'm going to add some notch marks. And also, if I use plastic in the gusset, I'll keep the plastic between those lines so that the corner doesn't have plastic, it just has foam. So my first step is going to be getting the 2 primary lengths between those notch marks that I made. So this step is to get the actual lengths of each segment between these notch marks and also these bolt holes. Now that I have all these dimensions, I'm gonna use those to build out the gusset. So one thing I've learned so far is doing things digitally is awesome, but one thing I would consider on a frame bag is because you have cables, I didn't capture that in my initial pattern. So here's a comparison of the cardboard cutout that I did and the pattern that I did on the last video. Now keep in mind, this doesn't have seam allowance and this other pattern does. They're pretty damn close except for on the upper where the cables go. Now, because I'm lazy, I'm going to digitize this pattern, put it into Clo. That way I can just cut out the pattern. I can make all my quick adjustments and I don't have to manually build the gusset. Because if there's one thing I hate, it's manually doing something that I could do a lot quicker on the computer. Side note, I just uploaded 5 bike bag patterns on bagbuff.com. Go check them out. You know this, you know the drill. So for materials on this build, I'm gonna use the 1000D Bright Ass Orange Cordura, a number 8 zipper, a number 8 zipper pole, plastic, and 3mm or 1/8 inch foam. I'm now selling foam on bagbuff.com, so go check that out. So the first thing I'm going to sew on is the zipper. That's going to be on the front top panel. I'm just going to have it teeth out because that's all I need right now. So now I need to sew on the lining on the other side. So now what I want to do is top stitch this foam in there. So finished. This is the panel. I'm gonna leave the white flat and then I'm gonna fold up the orange. And what I'm gonna do is snug this foam in as tight as I can over the seam allowance, but under the outside. And I'm just gonna try to keep this nice and tight this way while I sew in a top stitch. I'm gonna give myself a nice fat top stitch. Give myself some room to work with. Okay, here we go. Now what I'm gonna be doing is folding this back. I'm gonna push this up as tight as I can. And this is what I call a stay stitch or a set stitch, or I think people call it basting. I don't really know what the hell it's called. I didn't care if the foam lined up with the end of the fabric, because I can always just trim that away. I always like to leave the zippers hanging off the edge. Front and back panel are all complete, and feeling really good about it because they line up like butter. So now I'm going to be starting on the gusset. I'm going to start with the easy piece, which is going to be the top. And I've got a reinforcement here. This is the UMPE, HDPE, HGTV. This is the HGTV. Welcome to the HGTV show, where we're talking about sewing bike bags. We're so glad you could be with us this afternoon. Where the hell did my brain go? And what I'm gonna do here is sew these together. Actually, I don't even know what the right side of this fabric is. Is it the shiny side or the matte side? Well, that's impossible. So I'm just gonna line up these frickers. I'm gonna leave this side open. So I'm gonna stitch around, like yay. Zing! So what I'll be doing now is sliding el hombre and other el hombre here. And then also I've set these marks to put on some Velcro. Complete. Not too shabby. So next is the bottom and the back seat post, down post? Seat tube, down tube? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's one of the two. And if it's not, sorry. So what I'm gonna do the same thing where I'm just gonna sew the lining to the shell. Damn it, not this again. And then I'm gonna slide in my pieces. So what I'll do is I'll just line these suckers up. This is just so my plastic doesn't slide around. I have my bottom gusset, my top gusset. It'll end up being like yay. So what I'll do is flip that over on itself, give this a stitch and a bind. I'm gonna stitch and bind it. All right, so I set my seams and now I'm just gonna go over it with a nice little bind. Shoot, son. Nicely bound edges on the inside. Shaka! So next step is putting on my primary panels. And I'm just gonna run this whole thing on the binder. Got a swing away. Let me just double, triple, quadruple check. I'm gonna start in a place where I know that's where it goes. Sewing it on wrong. See? I do it too. Let me just double, triple, quadruple check. Well, I just ripped the seam and now I gotta use my damn brain because I thought I was hot, but I'm not. You really gotta pay attention on the corners. The rest of it doesn't have to be your 10mm or 3/8" seam allowance, but the corners do, because if you're set stitching around a corner, it still needs to like The stitch needs to be where the stitch needs to be, otherwise the thing's not gonna line up, you know? My large panels are off because when they were cutting on the plotter cutter, the gusset panels I had to actually make adjustments. It seemed like the plotter cutter was kind of skipping when it was cutting. Because my pattern pieces are all janky, what I'm gonna do is go to the important spots. The important spots are the straights. I don't really give a shit about the corners. I'm gonna run the straights, and I'm gonna see how I can finagle, fudge the corners, cut some corners, but in a good way, to get this bag to go together. Not 100% how I intended it, but it's gonna get the job done. That's gonna be all sorts of bunchy. That's definitely the pattern, because that is bad. So, as you see, I did all my straights on that one. And I've got some fudgery to work with. And give it the old trimmer-rooney. So, this is feeling wonky. I'm really frustrated about it. Didn't think about how it's gonna turn it out. I feel like it could be a shit show. Oh, that wasn't so bad. So janky. That pattern being off driving me bonkers. Look at that corner. It's painful. Well, let's go check it out next to the bike. Oh, don't tell me I wasn't recording. Oh, I am recording. Oh, thank God. Size and fit, I mean, it's great. It's just the janky ass corners that's not so good. This is why it's good to get a silhouette sample out of the way. Really understand the technical details of the project that you're working on without just going all in, full design. Imagine if I had built this like fully designed out with every feature that I wanted, spent all the time building it, all to find out that my corners were junk. That would have sucked. So the good thing is all the bolt holes line up. It fits well, the Velcro's in a fine location on all of it. The next steps here is really figuring out what went wrong. This is where I'll be going to my pattern. I'm gonna go into Clo or an Illustrator, and I'm gonna measure out in Illustrator what it should have been, and then measure out my pattern and see if it's off. Something I didn't shoot on this video because I had an issue with the pattern, the plotter cutter, is I actually took the gusset pieces and I had to cut off like up to 38 millimeters, like 1.5 inches. So I'm assuming there's something janky with the panels because I did not check the panels. This is why they say measure twice, cut once. I measured 1.5. I didn't measure twice, and this is what I get. Have you ever made a frame bag? If you have, leave me a comment. The do's, the don'ts, the should-haves. What should I have done different? I'm a little lost. Could use your help. Gotta get home. Gotta see the family. Gotta hug my little girl one more time. That's weird.